In the shadow of the windswept mountains, where forest met sea and mist-shrouded ancient stone, stood the forgotten kingdom of Lavendell. A realm beyond time, where legends claimed the sun's passage slowed and seasons lingered. The year was 1347 by the outside world's reckoning, though within Lavendell's borders, such measurements held little meaning. Sir Lachlan Lamborne, the last knight protector of Lavendell, sat astride his weary steed at the kingdom's edge, watching the sea crash against jagged cliffs below. 20 years of faithful service had etched deep lines around his grey eyes and threaded silver through his once dark hair. His armor, though meticulously maintained, bore the scars of countless battles fought to protect a kingdom the outside world had forgotten. "Come, stalwart," he murmured to his horse. Night approaches. As he rode through the ancient forest that formed Lavendell's natural boundary, Lachlan felt the familiar weight of solitude settle across his shoulders. He had sworn an oath when just 17, to serve as shield and sword for a realm that time itself had seemingly abandoned. That oath had consumed him, becoming the bedrock of his existence. Duty above all else. Duty instead of companionship. Duty in place of love. What use was love to a knight protector? What use was a family, children, laughter around a hearth? Such things were luxuries for men who had not sworn themselves to a sacred purpose. Lachlan had made his peace with this truth long ago, or so he told himself during the cold nights when loneliness gnawed deepest. The castle of Lavendell rose before him, its weathered stones glowing golden in the fading light. Unlike the grand fortifications of other kingdoms, Lavendell Castle embraced the land rather than dominated it. Towers spiraled like ancient trees, bridges arched like woodland boughs, and gardens cascaded down terrace slopes. In the courtyard, servants moved with unhurried purpose, acknowledging their knight protector with respectful nods. 20 years ago, when Lachlan had first arrived, the castle had bustled with activity, nobles, merchants, artisans. Now, fewer than 50 souls remained in the entire kingdom, maintaining rituals and traditions whose origins had been lost to memory. "Sir Lachlan, the council awaits," said Master Thorne, the aging steward. "They have questions about the stranger." Lachlan's jaw tightened. The stranger, the first outsider to breach Lavendell's borders in 7 years. "Tell them I shall join them after I've seen to my horse." In the stables, he removed Stalwart's saddle with practiced hands. His thoughts turned to the woman they had found 3 days prior, unconscious at the forest's edge. Slender, with auburn hair and clothing unlike anything seen in Lavendell. She bore no weapons, carried no identifying tokens. Only a strange brass instrument with glass lenses and a book filled with drawings of plants. A spy, Lord Edmund had declared immediately. From Normandy or the German lands. But Lachlan had seen many spies during the earlier days when kingdoms still remembered Lavendell enough to covet it. This woman seemed different. Her hands bore calluses of work, not war. And in her fevered murmurs, he had heard curiosity, not cunning. After ensuring Stalwart's comfort, Lachlan made his way to the Hall of Elders where 5 ancient nobles, the last of Lavendell's ruling families, gathered around a circular stone table. Their conversation ceased as he entered. Knight Protector, Lord Edmund acknowledged, his voice dry as autumn leaves. "What news of our perimeter?" "Secure, my lord." "No sign of others." "And what of this intruder? Has she awakened?" "Sister Agnes reports some improvement. The fever breaks, then returns." Lachlan kept his tone neutral, betraying nothing of his growing concern for the stranger. "When she wakes, we must determine her purpose," said Lady Matilda, eldest of the council. "Lavendell has remained hidden for a reason. Our ways must be preserved." Lachlan bowed slightly. "Of course, my lady." "You disagree?" Lord Edmund's eyes narrowed. I believe caution is warranted. But also mercy. Mercy is a luxury afforded to known quantities, Lord Edmund replied. Not potential threats. The meeting continued with discussions of harvests and rituals, but Lachlan's thoughts drifted to the infirmary where the stranger lay. When finally dismissed, instead of retiring to his quarters, he found himself walking toward the western tower where the healing chambers were housed. Sister Agnes greeted him with knowing eyes. I wondered when you would return, Sir Knight. I come only to ensure our security, he said stiffly. Of course. The elderly nun's lips curved slightly. She sleeps now, but spoke briefly this afternoon. Her name is Genevieve Grayson. She called herself a botanist. Lachlan approached the narrow bed where the woman lay. In slumber, her features appeared softer, younger than he had first thought. Perhaps 30 summers, not unlike his own 42. A faint scar traced her left cheekbone, and her hands, resting atop the woolen blanket, showed evidence of work and study. What brings a woman alone into lands unmarked on any map, he wondered aloud. She seeks something. Plants, she said. For healing. Sister Agnes adjusted the blanket. She asked about Lavendell's legendary herbs that supposedly stop time's march. Lachlan's pulse quickened. Few outsiders knew of those ancient rumors, that Lavendell's peculiar isolation stemmed from rare plants growing only within its boundaries. Plants said to slow aging itself. Did she explain how she found us? He asked. Not yet. Fever took her again before she could say more. He should report this immediately to the council. Any outsider seeking Lavendell's secrets posed a threat to their seclusion. His duty was clear: protect Lavendell from those who would exploit it. Yet as he looked at the sleeping woman's face, something unfamiliar stirred within him. Not just concern for a vulnerable stranger, but curiosity. In 20 years, he had never questioned his purpose or the isolation he enforced. The oath that defined him suddenly seemed to constrict, like armor worn too long. Sister Agnes touched his arm gently. She will need broth when she wakes. Perhaps you might bring some, Sir Knight? My old legs tire on those kitchen stairs. Lachlan recognized the transparent excuse but nodded anyway. Send word when she wakes. 2 days passed before the messenger came. Lachlan was training in the practice yard, sword-cutting elegant arcs through morning mist, when the boy approached. Sir Lachlan. Sister Agnes says the lady is awake and asking questions. He cleaned and sheathed his blade with deliberate care, refusing to acknowledge the quickening of his heart. In the kitchen, he collected a bowl of broth himself, ignoring the knowing glance from the cook. The woman, Genevieve, was sitting upright when he entered the infirmary, her auburn hair loosely braided over one shoulder. She looked up, and Lachlan found himself caught in the direct gaze of eyes the color of summer sage. So you're the knight who found me, she said. Her voice carried an unfamiliar accent, lilting and strange. Sister Agnes told me you carried me here yourself. Lachlan set the broth down carefully. It was my duty, nothing more. Nonetheless, I thank you. She studied him with undisguised interest. You're not what I expected. And what did you expect, my lady? Not my lady. Just Genevieve, please. And I'm not sure, perhaps someone more fearsome? The villagers in the last settlement spoke of Lavendell's guardian with such awe. Lachlan stiffened. What villagers? Lavendell has no neighboring settlements. 3 days' journey east. A small place. Millerton, I think they called it. Impossible. Millerton had been abandoned decades ago when plague swept through the eastern valleys. You're mistaken, he said flatly. Millerton exists only in memory. Genevieve frowned. I assure you, I spent 2 nights there. The innkeeper directed me toward these mountains when I inquired about unusual plant specimens. Confusion and disquiet rippled through Lachlan. Either this woman was lying, or something was very wrong with his understanding of the world beyond Lavendell's borders. Neither possibility sat well. "Why do you seek these plants?" he demanded. She hesitated, then reached for the leather-bound book on the bedside table. "I study medicinal herbs. My father was a physician who believed nature provides remedies for all ailments if we only know where to look." She opened the book, revealing pages of meticulous drawings, leaves, flowers, roots, all annotated in precise handwriting. "I've spent 7 years documenting healing plants across Europe. But the stories of Lavendell's flora are unique." "Stories can be dangerous things to pursue," Lachlan said quietly. "Especially when they lead to forgotten kingdoms." "Is that what this is?" "A forgotten kingdom." Her eyes brightened with scholarly interest. "The architectural elements I glimpsed before losing consciousness seem to combine Norman and earlier Saxon influences, yet with distinctive variations I've never—" "You should not have come here," he interrupted. "And once recovered, you cannot stay." Her expression sobered. "I understand your caution, Sir Knight. But I assure you, my interest is purely academic. I seek knowledge, not conquest. Knowledge has conquered more kingdoms than any sword." Their conversation was cut short by Sister Agnes's return. The nun smiled at the sight of them, clearly pleased by Lachlan's presence. "Our guest improves quickly," she observed. "Perhaps tomorrow she might take air in the garden?" "With an escort, of course." Lachlan opened his mouth to refuse, but found himself saying, "I shall make arrangements." The next afternoon, walking beside Genevieve through the castle's terraced gardens, Lachlan felt oddly self-conscious. He had removed his armor, wearing only a simple tunic and breeches, his sword belt his sole concession to duty. Genevieve moved with growing strength, stopping frequently to examine plants. Her excitement was palpable when she discovered specimens unknown to her. "This resembles valerian, but the leaf structure differs significantly," she murmured, kneeling beside a purple-flowered herb. "And its scent, more intense, almost." "Time-touched," Lachlan supplied without thinking. She looked up sharply. "What do you mean by that?" He hesitated, aware he had already said too much. "It's what the herbalists here call certain plants. Those that grow nowhere else." "The plants rumored to slow aging?" "They actually exist." Her voice remained level, but her eyes shone with barely contained excitement. "I didn't say that." "You didn't need to." She stood, brushing soil from her borrowed dress. "How long have you served as Lavendell's protector, Sir Lachlan?" 20 years. "And before that?" "I was a knight in service to King Edward." "Which King Edward?" The question caught him off guard. "Edward II, of course." Genevieve's expression changed subtly. "Edward II died in 1327. 20 years ago. That's not possible. I received word of his death shortly before coming to Lavendell." "Sir Lachlan," she said carefully, "what year do you believe it to be?" "It's the year of our Lord 1347. She fell silent, her gaze moving from his face to the castle walls, then to the forest beyond. "The last plague outbreak in England was 70 years ago. Not decades." Cold certainty began to settle in Lachlan's stomach. "You're mistaken." "I'm not." Her voice was gentle. "Something is very strange about this place. About time itself here." That night, Lachlan could not sleep. He paced his chamber, Genevieve's words echoing in his mind. Could it be true? Had the outside world moved forward while Lavendell remained suspended? It would explain why fewer visitors came each decade, why neighboring settlements disappeared from their awareness. Just before dawn, he made a decision. Taking a small leather pouch, he descended to the gardens and carefully collected cuttings from 7 plants, the time-touched herbs that grew only within Lavendell's boundaries. Then he saddled Stalwart and rode toward the eastern forest. 3 days later, he returned, his face ashen and his eyes haunted. The council awaited him in the great hall, along with Genevieve, who had apparently been summoned in his absence. "Knight Protector, explain yourself," demanded Lord Edmund. "You abandoned your post without authorization." Lachlan's voice, when he finally spoke, was hollow. "I rode to Millerton." "Millerton has been gone these 50 years, scoffed Lady Matilda. "No. It stands. Changed, but it stands. With buildings of a style I've never seen and people dressed in garments." He paused, struggling. "I spoke with their elder. According to their reckoning, the year is 1462. Silence fell over the hall, broken only by the crackling of the hearth fire. "That's impossible," Lord Edmund finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Not impossible," Genevieve interjected. "Just extraordinary. Somehow, Lavendell exists in a pocket where time passes differently." "I suspected as much when comparing historical events Sir Lachlan mentioned with my own knowledge." "And who exactly are you to make such claims?" Lady Matilda demanded. "A scholar of natural philosophy and medicine," Genevieve answered. "And someone who has traveled far enough to know that the world holds many wonders beyond easy explanation." Lachlan stepped forward. "My lords and ladies, I have served Lavendell faithfully for what I believe to be 20 years. In that time, I've watched our kingdom grow ever more isolated, our population dwindling. Now I understand why." He placed the leather pouch on the table. "These herbs, the time-touched plants, they don't just slow aging. They slow time itself within our borders. While we've lived 20 years, the outside world has experienced over a century." The council members exchanged troubled glances. "If this is true," Lord Edmund said slowly, "then our isolation is even more essential. Imagine the chaos if the world discovered plants that could manipulate time's passage. Or the good that could come from properly studied remedies," countered Genevieve. "Treatments for ailments that currently claim countless lives. The outside world has always sought to exploit Lavendell's treasures," Lady Matilda said sharply. "We retreated from that world for good reason." The debate continued long into the evening, but Lachlan heard little of it. A realization was forming in his mind that his oath to protect Lavendell had become an oath to protect its isolation, its stagnation. The very quality he had valued, unchanging duty, was a symptom of a kingdom frozen in time, neither living nor dying. In the days that followed, Lachlan found himself drawn repeatedly to Genevieve's company. She had been granted limited access to the castle archives and gardens for her research, under his supervision. Together they pored over ancient texts, comparing botanical knowledge. "These illustrations match plants I've documented across Europe," she told him one afternoon, "but these 7, the ones you collected, appear nowhere else in recorded herbalism." He watched her hands as she sketched, steady and precise. "What will you do with this knowledge?" She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Learn. Understand. Perhaps find ways to help people. And if that knowledge could be misused." "All knowledge can be misused, Sir Lachlan. That doesn't mean we should remain ignorant." Her words disturbed him, not because they were wrong, but because they struck at the heart of the philosophy that had governed Lavendell for generations, and his own life for 20 years. Preservation through isolation. Safety through secrecy. As weeks passed, the council grew increasingly concerned with Genevieve's presence. Lord Edmund argued repeatedly for her immediate departure, while Lady Matilda suggested more drastic measures to ensure Lavendell's secrets remained protected. "She cannot be permitted to leave with knowledge of our time-touched herbs," the elderly noblewoman insisted during one particularly heated meeting. "What do you propose?" Lachlan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Imprisonment? Execution?" The silence that followed confirmed his fears. "She has done nothing to warrant such treatment," he continued. "She seeks understanding, not power." "Your judgment is compromised," Lord Edmund said coldly. "We have all observed your growing attachment to the outsider." Lachlan felt heat rise to his face. Was it so obvious, then? The way his heart quickened when Genevieve entered a room. How he found himself sharing thoughts he'd never spoken aloud before. The small touches, her hand on his arm, their fingers brushing as they turned pages, that lingered in his memory. "My judgment remains sound," he said stiffly. "But I will not enforce cruelty in the name of duty." That night, he sought Genevieve in the library tower where she often worked late into the evening. She looked up from her notes, a smile warming her face at the sight of him. "You seem troubled," she observed. "The council fears your knowledge." He closed the door behind him. "They debate what to do with you once your research concludes." Understanding darkened her eyes. "And their options aren't particularly appealing, I gather." "No." He moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit garden below. "I've been contemplating something. A possibility I've never considered before." "What's that?" "Leaving Lavendell." The words, once spoken, hung in the air between them. Treason against his oath, against everything he had built his life around. Genevieve set down her quill. "Why would you consider such a thing?" "Because I've begun to question whether my duty serves a purpose beyond perpetuating isolation. Whether protecting a kingdom that stands still serves life or merely preserves its appearance." He turned to face her. "And because when I imagine you leaving, returning to a world where time flows naturally while I remain here, unchanging." He could not finish the thought. She rose from her chair and crossed to him, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her green eyes. "What of your oath?" "An oath to protect a kingdom includes protecting its future. Perhaps Lavendell's future lies not in isolation but in careful reconnection with the world." The council would never agree. "No. But there may be another way." He hesitated, then continued, "There are others here, younger servants, guards, who chafe at our isolation. Who wonder what lies beyond our borders. You're proposing more than just leaving," she realized. "You're considering a fundamental change to Lavendell itself." "I'm considering that perhaps the greatest protection I can offer is not a sword against the outside world, but a bridge to it, carefully constructed, vigilantly maintained." Genevieve studied him, her expression thoughtful. Such a change would not come easily. Few worthwhile things do. In that moment, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since their first meeting. Without conscious thought, Lachlan reached up to touch her face, his calloused fingers tracing the scar on her cheekbone. "I never expected you," he said softly. "In 20 years of dutiful solitude, I never imagined someone would appear and make me question everything I believed." "And I never expected to find a forgotten kingdom," she replied, "or its night protector." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, then deepened with a hunger born of recognition, two souls who had found something unexpected and precious in each other. The weeks that followed were both wondrous and tense. By day, Lachlan performed his duties while quietly speaking with those in the castle who might support change. By night, he and Genevieve planned and dreamed, their love growing alongside their shared vision for Lavendell's future. They discovered that several of the younger residents harbored similar desires for controlled reconnect with the outside world. Even Sister Agnes, when carefully approached, revealed surprising support. "These old walls have sheltered us," she told them, "but walls can become prisons when there are no doors." Their planning came to an abrupt halt one stormy evening when Lord Edmund summoned the council for an emergency session. Lachlan arrived to find Genevieve already there, her face pale but composed. "Knight Protector," Lord Edmund said coldly, "we have uncovered disturbing evidence. This woman has been secretly corresponding with parties outside Lavendell." Lachlan kept his expression neutral. "What evidence?" Lady Matilda pushed forward a folded parchment. "This message was intercepted being carried by one of our kitchen boys. It details the properties of our time-touched herbs and indicates planned meetings with scholars from Oxford." Genevieve lifted her chin. "I make no apology for seeking to share knowledge that could benefit humanity. The healing properties of these plants could save countless lives." "They could also destroy Lavendell," countered Lord Edmund. "Once the world learns of herbs that control time's passage, armies will descend upon us." "Not if the knowledge is carefully managed," Genevieve argued. "Shared with trustworthy scholars, not rulers or mercenaries." "And who decides what constitutes trustworthy?" "You?" Lady Matilda's voice dripped with scorn. "Perhaps we all should," Lachlan interjected. "Perhaps isolation has served its purpose, and a new approach is needed." The council members stared at him in shock. "You betray your oath," Lord Edmund said, his voice trembling with rage. "An oath sworn before God to protect Lavendell." "I uphold the spirit of that oath," Lachlan replied steadily. "But protection takes many forms. We are dying slowly here, our population dwindles, our purpose fades. What am I protecting if not the future of Lavendell?" "Arrest them both," ordered Lady Matilda. "The Knight Protector has been bewitched by this outsider." Guards moved forward uncertainly, torn between lifelong obedience to the council and their respect for Lachlan. "Wait," called a new voice. All heads turned as Master Thorne, the aging steward, entered the hall. He carried an ancient leather-bound volume that Lachlan recognized as the founding charter of Lavendell. "My lords and ladies, before hasty action is taken, I feel compelled to share something." The old man opened the book with reverent hands. "Our founding principles, often cited but rarely read in full." He cleared his throat and read, "We establish Lavendell as a sanctuary of knowledge and healing, separate from the conflicts of kings and emperors, yet not removed from humanity's needs. Our isolation is not an end unto itself, but a means to preserve wisdom until the time comes when it may safely benefit all God's children." Silence fell over the hall as the words sank in. "Our founders never intended perpetual isolation," Master Thorne continued. "They sought temporary refuge from a world at war, intending eventual reconnect when circumstances allowed." "Circumstances have never allowed," Lord Edmund protested. "Because we never looked for them," Lachlan countered. "We grew comfortable in our seclusion, forgetting its purpose." The debate that followed lasted until dawn, passionate and often heated. Young residents joined the discussion, speaking of their desires to see the wider world while maintaining Lavendell's special character. Older members voiced fears of exploitation and destruction. Finally, as morning light filtered through the high windows, a compromise emerged. Lavendell would begin a carefully controlled opening to the outside world, starting with scholarly exchanges. The time-touched herbs would remain protected, with only limited samples provided for study under strict conditions. Most importantly, Lavendell would establish new settlements at its borders, places where time flowed normally, serving as buffers between the kingdom's heart and the outside world. And who will oversee this transition? Lord Edmund asked, his voice weary but resigned. Who will protect Lavendell during this vulnerable period? All eyes turned to Lachlan. The Night Protector must evolve as Lavendell evolves, he said. No longer simply a sword against intruders, but a bridge between worlds. His gaze found Genevieve across the table. With help from those who understand both. The months that followed brought remarkable change to Lavendell. Under Lachlan and Genevieve's guidance, the kingdom began its careful emergence from isolation. Small delegations of scholars were permitted controlled visits. Young residents traveled outside for the first time, returning with news and knowledge. Most significantly, they discovered that Lavendell's time distortion was not uniform throughout the kingdom. In its center, time moved most slowly, at its edges, almost normally. This created natural boundaries for different types of interaction with the outside world. On a crisp autumn day, 1 year after Genevieve's arrival, she and Lachlan stood on the castle's highest tower, overlooking the valley below where construction had begun on a new settlement, one designed to bridge Lavendell's timeless heart with the flowing world beyond. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, leaning against his shoulder. "Changing the oath you lived by for so long?" Lachlan considered the question, watching golden leaves drift from ancient oaks in the royal garden. An oath's meaning lies not in its words but its purpose. I swore to protect Lavendell, and that hasn't changed. Only my understanding of what protection truly means. He turned to her, taking her hands in his. Besides, I gained far more than I surrendered. As did I. She smiled. A forgotten kingdom and its night. More than I ever dreamed of finding in these mountains. Not forgotten anymore, he corrected gently. And better for it. As the sun dipped toward the western peaks, they remained together, watching light play across a kingdom reawakening, a place where time had stood still but now flowed with new purpose. And if it moved a little slower within Lavendell's heart than in the world beyond, perhaps that was a blessing rather than a curse, a reminder to cherish each moment as it passed. For the Night Protector and the woman who had changed his world, it meant a future together that might stretch longer than most. A future built not on isolation and unchanging duty, but on love and the courage to grow. And in that, Lachlan found a far greater oath to keep.